Hang on for just a second as I set this up for us. Okay, so can you see the title slide? And yes, thanks for the thumbs up, Rajat. Okay, so this is what we're going to talk about. When I communicated with Rajat, the request that I talk about networking and negotiation. These are sort of standalone topics as well. So what I've tried to do in the time that I have is to put together sort of the key most important elements so that by the time you're done with this presentation, assuming you're going to stay with me through the bitter end, right, the 45 minutes that we have, that you will have at least the key concepts down. And then, you know, we're always available as an office to work with you one-on-one for any career development issue. Yeah, so with that being said, a quick formal introduction. My name is Amruta Inamdar. You're welcome to address me by my first name. If you wish to address me by my last name, then I'd prefer Dr. Inamdar or Ms. Inamdar. I'm not Mrs. Inamdar. That's my mom's name. My pronouns are she, her, and hers, and I work at the CCO as a graduate student specialist. My official title is Senior Career Services Consultant, but basically my job involves working one-on-one and in workshops like this with masters, PhDs, and then postdocs if they wish to attend any of our presentations. I have the CCO's main contact information on there, but I'm happy to share my own email with you in case anybody wants to work one-on-one. But I usually have this available. It's easy to remember, askcco@purdue.edu. So use that for any quick questions. If you want to direct a question at me, put that in the note, right? Say, you know, forward this to Amrita and they'll make sure it gets to me. Yeah. Thank you to those of you who've chosen to switch on your cameras. Let's get started with what we're going to talk about. So as I said, you know, these two are sort of standalone topics in some ways, but what pulls them together, right? Apart from your interest in talking about these two things, negotiation and networking, what is important and common in the two of them or in any career skill that you're trying to develop is these three elements, right? You have to put in the time and do your homework. You can call it research, you can call it background information, whatever it is, right? But you need to be preparing in advance by finding out information, whether it's about yourself as a professional, whether it's about the company you're applying for, whether it's about the industry you're trying to make, you know, get a foot in the door of, right? You're not familiar with it, perhaps. Whatever it is, research is important. The second bit that's going to be common across any professional development exercise you engage in is practice. I think there's a myth that some people are just naturally good interviewers, just naturally good presenters. If you speak to them, you will know that they've spent some time doing research and learning about their audience and then practicing, right? So that's also true for networking and also true for negotiation. Don't just, you know, think, I'm just going to wing it when the conversation happens. Best case scenario, you would know your talking points. You would have sounded out the words with a colleague, mentor, friend, whoever. We sound really good in our heads, but sometimes the translation into words that are being presented to an actual live human being, not that good. So please consider practicing, right? And then the third element that pulls all of this together is the engagement piece. It's going to look different. If it's networking, you may be engaging with a potential employer. If it's negotiation, they want you. They've made an offer, so you're engaging with a potential colleague at this point, right? If it is a LinkedIn profile that you want to put together, you're engaging with this passive audience out there, right? The engagement piece is basically you executing the work you've done, the practice you've done, and making it available to whoever that chosen audience member is at that point, right? So if the connection drops out, I hope you will remember these three things at this point. Put in the hard work, practice, 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 and then be ready to engage with your audience because you've researched your audience and you've practiced your pitch, right? So specifically, what are we going to talk about today? hold on 1 second. I need to have my phone ready to make sure I keep on time with what we're doing. So key elements of networking and negotiation. So why it's necessary to network. The fact that you're here tells me that you already think this is important, but I want to drive the point home a little bit and tell you all the reasons why it's important. I also want to talk through what it is, right? I think the word networking can come across, and these are just words I've heard from students when I'm working one-on-one with them, come across as superficial, unnecessary. People need to fake it till they're making it, so to speak. Nobody really cares because they can see through you. Some of this may be true all the time, right? But that doesn't take away the fact that you have to do it. And I'm hoping that the breakdown of what networking actually is will open your eyes, if there's any skeptics in the audience, to how it's a pretty sort of normal, authentic activity we're doing all the time, right? Very quick mention of the tools and strategies. Because I've tried to condense a ton of information into this, some of my slides are going to be text heavy, heads up. I don't usually like them that way, but we got to adapt, right? Then in terms of the negotiation piece, I'm hoping that we'll talk about how you think through your own value and your priorities when you're at the negotiation table, right? So preparing in advance so that when you're at the table, you're articulating them effectively. Keeping in mind that the employer is going to be a big factor in this, right? The capacity of the employer in the specific industry you want to join is going to be a big factor in your negotiation tactics. And then just a talk through of the process, right? What does that conversation look like and sound like? And then hopefully time for questions and answers. As Rajat mentioned, I'm happy to answer questions during the presentation, right? So type them in the chat. I really appreciate him volunteering as moderator. So I will look to you for questions and I will not be looking at the chat myself. Yeah. So why is networking necessary? These really big reasons, right? The volume, and I'm happy to share those links if folks want to actually read the articles on which I'm basing this. Obviously, these are popular and sort of mainstream publications. These are not research articles, right? But the sheer volume of applications, there was a study that said that big companies, large to medium-sized companies, I should say, receive about 6 times the number of applications as they have employees in the company. So if Facebook, and I'm not saying any of y'all are applying to it, but it's just a convenient example, if Facebook has 60,000 employees working all over the world, they're getting 3 times the number of applications, which means you got to make sure that your application is standing out, right? A piece of this is making sure that your documents sort of work through the ATS, like the computer that scans them is going to pass them on to the next stage, but you getting in front of a human being, networking is critical. Recruitment is expensive. If there's a way that companies can speed up the process, save on a few costs, they're going to do it, which is why I think that virtual recruitment is here to stay. It's so much cheaper. Oftentimes companies can get the same information virtually that they could in person, so they're going to keep doing it. Hidden jobs, sometimes you're going to find a position that yours not publicly advertised, right? Or sometimes they're going to create a job for you because your skill set is so specialized. They knew they needed something, but you're the answer to their problems. And they weren't even sort of working through HR for an actual position. You showed up, happy for both of you, and it's going to be a job, right? So hidden jobs exist, especially for folks in this audience, all advanced degree holders or seekers, right? Your specialized skill set will often lead to this hidden job opportunity. The next piece is employee referrals. Related to the cost of recruitment. If companies get a referral from an existing current employee, they're going to speed you up and give you a chance, right? Networking will get you that. If you all have, any of you been on the internship or job market, you know that big companies often have one of the questions in the online form is, do you know somebody at the company who's going to be your referral, right? You got to have people. You got to ask them before you put their name down. The worst thing you could do to your chances is to put someone's name down, and when somebody is out to them, they say, who, what? I don't know who you're talking about. That is going to doom your candidacy. So check with the people you're putting the name down on, but that's why you need networking. And the last piece is career diversity. There are many more jobs you can do than you think you can do given the advanced training you have, right? I think it can be a bit of a myth that the more you specialize, the less you can do. I think transferable skills expand when you're in a graduate program. And so think of the fact that if you don't talk about what you're doing, people will not see the value of what you're doing, and they will not see potential in you working for them. So all reasons to network. I hope I've convinced you that the 45 minutes you're spending here are going to be well worth your time. What is networking is the next piece. Are we doing okay so far? I'm seeing a lot of, yeah. Okay, thank you, David, for nodding. And sort of speaking for the audience. Thank you. So what is networking? This is what I said I like to talk about. So it's not this uncomfortable process. Networking is basically one word for all of these things. You're not going to be doing all of these things all of the time, but there will be elements of this in any networking attempt, right? You will be asking people questions about themselves. You will be listening to them, right? Sometimes networking is seen as just can't wait for this person to be done so I can say what I need to say. That's not ideal networking. Hopefully, you're going to ask them follow-up questions, and then through that, organically talk about your own skill sets and interests. Part of this presumes that the person you're networking with is a polite and respectful person who's going to turn the spotlight back on you, right? Is not just going to talk about themselves, which means that when you're networking, think of it as a dialogue, right? So ideally make a positive impression, continue the conversation. You're developing and nurturing a relationship. I just noticed a spelling error there. So hopefully, Rajat, this will not be one of the snippets you share on your social media platforms. And then reaching out for help and offering help, right? So if you have done any one of these things with any human being in your life, you can safely presume they are part of your network, right? And if you think about this and actually were to go through this list, you've probably done all of these things within the week, even if it's not with the same person, and even if it's not a formal networking opportunity, right? So think of doing this more strategically when it comes to the job search. And I would strongly encourage you all to focus on the first three things when you all are thinking about networking, right? Focusing on the person you're talking to. We'll practice this in a little bit, but networking is not just you presenting yourself. It's not all about the elevator pitch, right? You can have the best elevator pitch, but you present it to a hostile audience, nothing's happening. Or if you present it to an audience that's not going to engage with it by listening to you and asking you follow-up questions, nothing is happening, right? So be the audience you want to be in front of. What do I mean by that? Basically, if I had to summarize networking, it is you telling people about yourself and learning about other people. I think what often gets lost in conversations is, I got to have a great elevator pitch. My LinkedIn summary needs to be perfect. I need to have the best professional attire, so my headshot looks good for, my LinkedIn summary, etc., my website, whichever, right? What about the audience? You got to engage with them a little bit more. So we need volunteers for this. I'd like everybody to engage by listening to what happens, but I'd like someone to volunteer to be my conversation partner in this. So anybody wanting to join this activity? Don't all jump at once. Would it help y'all if I explained a little more in detail what I'm expecting or hoping for? You and I are just going to talk, right? We're just going to talk and everybody else is going to listen to us. There is one template, plenty exists. If you've Googled it, you'll see there are lots of templates out there, but there's one template on your screen for an elevator pitch. So if you'd like to use this to introduce yourself, go for it. Even if you use it or not, try and keep it a brief introduction, try and be authentic. And it's just a conversation. It's not practice because I'm giving you no time, but you're speaking to me, a career coach, not a fellow civil engineer in transportation engineering, right? So that's your audience who's ready to try this out with me. And all are welcome to say, as a group, we will not engage, and then we can move on to the next piece. This is a democratic process, folks. Anyone?
All right, I'll go for it.
Okay, who is that? I can't see. Justin, is that Justin?
Yeah, it's Justin.
Okay. Hi, Justin. So we're going to start our conversation now. So Justin, hi. Thank you for agreeing to volunteer for the good of the order. Tell me about yourself.
So I'm a third-year PhD student studying at Purdue University.
Okay.
I got my bachelor's at UW of Wisconsin, Platteville, and my master's at Purdue.
Yeah.
Do you want me? I don't know.
I mean, that's interesting. So tell me something, Justin. So Madison to Indiana, are you missing? I'm sorry, you didn't say Madison, you said Wisconsin. My apologies. Are you missing being in Wisconsin?
No, I really enjoy the adventure that I'm having here in Indiana and getting to meet new people, different types of people, and a more diverse environment.
Nice. So are you meeting folks through your program? Tell me about your program. What are you doing at Purdue?
So I'm studying transportation,
Okay.
and a lot of the colleges are at this workshop right now, but we do a lot of things within research, and the research space is like in connecting autonomous vehicles. Some of
Yeah.
my colleagues work on some more hands-on like workshops and stuff, and I join them on that, as well as yeah, that's a lot of what we do.
Yeah, that sounds really interesting. What are you thinking you want to do once you reach the end of the program?
Towards the end, I would like to either go to industry or pursue a career in academia.
Okay.
I'm open to both right now and just trying to explore both venues.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah. There's pros and cons to both, right? Yeah. Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this about yourself, Justin. We're going to say and scene, and we're done with this. Okay. So everybody else who's part of the audience, I'd like you to reflect and think a little bit more about what just happened. Um, if you had to do a LinkedIn introduction to either, assuming you don't know Justin, right? You've just heard him speak. If you had to do a LinkedIn introduction of Justin, would you know how to look him up on LinkedIn? So have you registered his name, right? If you had to connect with me on LinkedIn and you've been listening to me talk, we're presuming you're part of the audience I'm talking to, right? Do you know my name? Could you look me up on LinkedIn? If you had to look either one of us on LinkedIn, would you just send a connection request to network, or would you have something to say in the note section that would remind us of how we met you? Yeah. And then just another set of questions for you all, and feel free to sort of unmute yourself and share. When you were watching Justin and me interact, anything that you noticed about our nonverbal communication or our body language, given that we're on Zoom, right? Anything else about the interaction that is worth commenting on?
Okay, I'll start the self-critique.
Okay, it doesn't have to be a critique, Justin, but thank you.
So one of the things is I did not state my last name, and I don't know if you introduced yourself, making it difficult to look up on LinkedIn. And
Yeah,
we did not get much information on you either.
yeah,
Again, making it difficult to connect with you on LinkedIn.
yeah. All very good points. I agree. And we don't have to go on. I don't want this to be let's critique Justin and Amrita at all. This is just an example of what a potential networking interaction looks like. And what I'd like you to do is reflect on what were you doing when somebody was sharing their version of an elevator pitch, right? Or when they were engaging in conversation. This could have been us standing in a group of, there's about 38 people. So it could be it's a big group to be standing in one sort of circle, but let's imagine, right? If you were listening to us, were you listening attentively? If we had made eye contact with any one of you, could we know that you were listening to us? So was there any engagement from your part, right? Um, this was basically Justin introducing himself. Did I help turn the introduction into a full conversation. I asked a lot of questions about himself, like lots of follow-up questions. What are you doing? What did you like about this? Basing it on what he'd shared. So the initial piece was third year student, I don't know if he specified PhD, from got a bachelor's degree from Wisconsin. So I asked about that, right? And then we followed up with, what are you doing at Purdue? So the other thing to think about is, am I sharing information that I want to be asked about? If you're going to share, for example, if I were to share, I'm from India, and then the person I'm talking to says, oh, really, where from in India? And then it becomes this whole conversation about where they've traveled in India. Not what I wanted to talk about, but I gave you the opening by sharing that, right? So this is to say that the elevator pitch, the introduction, can be very strategic. If you want somebody to ask you about something, make sure you mention it in your introduction. Lead them towards asking you about that, right? And the responsibility of turning an introduction into a conversation lies on both people. So I did not introduce myself officially, but also because he was not prompted, Justin didn't ask me, well, tell me about yourself, right? I'm not saying it was a responsibility, but I'm saying in a networking conversation, it would have been, right? We're both responsible. Whoever's in the conversation needs to be engaged and sort of trying to continue that relationship, yeah? And then the other thing I'd like you to reflect on is, if you were having this conversation with Justin, would you have asked different questions than I did? I picked up on Wisconsin. I asked about Purdue. I asked, things like that. Would you have done something else? Right? And it would all have been legitimate. I'm not saying what I did was completely wrong or what you are thinking of would have been a disaster. Not saying that at all, right? But these are human interactions, very subjective choices we're making when we listen to information, right? So all of this to say, it's a two-way process. Both of you got to work at it. Share strategically, share information you want to be asked questions about, and also be ready to handle what comes your way, right? Because people are hearing things they're interested in and going to ask you questions about things they're interested in. You're not going to be able to control the conversation as much, right? So thanks again to Justin on behalf of everyone for jumping in, because I did not tell you what it was about before you signed up, and I appreciate you volunteering. So all this to say, play to your strengths, right? There's some of us, and I'm not saying that the world can be easily divided into introverts and extroverts. There are also ambiverts, right? That have a bit of both. There are also people in the world who refuse to agree to this definition of introversion and extroversion. So it takes all sorts, right? But the point of this is to say, play to your strengths. If you know that you're the sort of person who needs time to process information, maybe going to your first conference alone and wanting to network with 20 new contacts is an unrealistic goal, right? So strategize. What could you do to make this more successful for yourself? If you know you're the sort of person who enjoys interacting with strangers, but may meet somebody who's more shy, maybe more harder to get a conversation going, what are strategies you may need to know that may lead them to answer questions, right? So engaging with this as a human activity, as opposed to I gotta get stuff out and get stuff checklist, right? Not sort of thinking of networking as that sort of activity. Yeah. So what are some tools and strategies that you'd use to make this happen? Now, there's a question at the bottom of your screen. If you have any you'd like to share, please jump in. Raja did say that there are folks in the conversation who have worked in industry before. There are faculty and other mentors. So whether you're, students, postdoc, staff, faculty, mentor, whoever, if you have strategies to share, please do for the good of the group, right? So this is sort of an open sharing place if you'd like it to be. But as you're thinking about that, I have my first screen with tons of information on it. So tools and strategies I would encourage you all to think about when you think about networking is, and this sort of goes back to the first three things I said, right? Research, practice, and engage. Please prepare in advance. If you know you're going to attend an important event, who's coming, what is their background, how might you find a way to connect with them? Can you email them in advance and say, really looking forward to connecting with you?
You did the same thing.
I think somebody's accidentally unmuted themselves, unless you want to speak with us. Okay. But yeah,
Sorry.
prepare. Oh, that's okay. That's fine. It happens. Prepare in advance as much as you can. I will share a quick anecdote. I'm not comfortable walking into a room of strangers, metaphorically speaking, because in COVID, I'm not walking into rooms of strangers. So what I really do is I email folks in advance, right? I've done it for every conference I've attended. Given that I'm the only person in my office who works with graduate students, there's one conference where I'm the only person from Purdue at, and it is very intimidating for me. And so for that, especially, I email folks in advance and say, and my logic is, single person office, working with grad students, land grant institution, I try and find things in common. Another key for networking is find things in common, right? And then if I meet them at the conference, great. If I don't, I can follow up and say, try to connect with you, but I know you were busy. Can we try find time after, right? So set it up in advance. Ask for informational interviews. Those are easy ways to get a conversation started, because if you remember the second piece, focus on the person in front of you. That's what the informational interview allows you to do, right? So how did you find this job? What's the best part about it? What do you like the most? What does a typical day look like? Do you work on cross-functional teams? Who is in, what sorts of projects you enjoy working on, right? Focus on them. Eventually, the conversation will come back on you organically often, but if it doesn't, you can pull it back on yourself and say, the reason I'm asking you this is because, and then you can talk about yourself, right? But great 20-minute conversations to get a future relationship sort of going, right? The elevator pitch is a great way to summarize who you are. There are plenty templates out there. Happy to work with you one-on-one if you're trying to practice. Very, very important to use active listening skills and follow-up questions. It's not good enough to have a polished introduction. You've got to find a way to keep the conversation going, right? Please use virtual platforms. I mean, even truer now in the age of this global pandemic, but even beforehand, right? Like I've shared, more and more companies are going to be using virtual recruitment. Some of it may involve virtual videos, right? So, the videos where you sort of record your answer, and again, you're speaking into an abyss. So practice that and then send it off, right? So that's an interviewing piece, but I think networking in general will help you with presenting yourself with all virtual platforms and then follow up with people. It doesn't have to be a very deep, engaged conversation each time. You might send a message saying, hey, I saw that you published a paper, looking forward to reading it. Even if you don't end up reading it, that's okay. You're sort of talking about an intention. Sometimes intentions don't become executions, right? It's okay. If you're on LinkedIn with people, liking or congratulating them on things they share is enough following up for now. But do it. It's easier so that when you reach out to them for specific asks, you're not feeling uncomfortable about ignored them for 2 years. How can I go back and ask them for a favor, right? You can still do it, but the best piece would be if you did keep in touch with them and followed up once in a while, right? So if we had to summarize this, know yourself. Please be engaged with the person you're networking with, whatever platform you're on, and follow up after. If you're engaged with them, you will have enough information to follow up with them after, whether it's through LinkedIn, an email, or just, I don't know, a ResearchGate connection, whatever it is, right? So summary of networking. I've been talking for about half an hour. Are we doing okay so far? Yes. Okay. Thanks, Rajat, for the thumbs up. So the next thing is going to be tons of information about negotiation. I do think I'm going to be running out of time. So if you have questions, please be posting them. I'd rather answer your questions than hear my own voice all the time. But what's the deal with negotiation? These two things. You got to know your value. You got to know the employer's capacity. Just because one employer tends to pay, this 6-digit salary does not mean the one you have an offer from will go into 6 digits. Maybe they're going to stop at 98, right? So the networking, the negotiation piece, like the networking piece, has to be specifics, based on specifics. Your value for that position, for that industry in the current market, and then the employer's capacity in the same environment, right? So what you need to learn or know before you get the negotiating table is these 4 questions, not a comprehensive list, but a pretty good overview to recognize who you are as a professional and what you want to keep you satisfied in that profession or that specific jobs, right? So what do you need to survive? Things would be like, what does my take home pay need to be, right? How much paid time off do I have? What do you need to thrive? Well, what opportunities are there for advancement? What kind of work culture is it? Am I going to be happy here? Am I going to be, getting more than I need to survive, big paycheck, but just the work culture is not something I'm going to enjoy, right? What do you value? Are you looking for a job that is going to help you pay debts? Very valid concern. Or are you looking for a job that maybe is not as much money, but the potential for growth and advancement is fantastic, right? So all of these will affect how you negotiate because the company is going to offer you, remember, employer capacity. The employer capacity is going to determine what you can sort of ask for, right? And so what you value hopefully is in sync with what the company can offer. And then this question may be surprising, but do you really want that job? I've worked with some folks in some departments that have to, quote unquote, have to put through 80, 90 applications, right? Because that's the market they are facing. And maybe they will get callbacks from a few and then they'll see what they're going to follow on, right? What interviews they get, etc. And I'm thinking if you're putting in 80, 90 applications, every one of the jobs is not a job you want. This is a necessity or, a disciplinary convention. This is not, oh, I want that job. And that's fine. If that's the situation you're in, that's fine. But when you're negotiating, think about, do you want that job, right? How badly are you going to negotiate for a job you kind of want? You will take it because there's nothing better versus I really like this, need to make this happen. Yeah. Responses will be subjective, but these are questions that you need to think about. After you've, and it's not chronological, I did say after, but also think about gathering the hard facts, right? Specific budgets. I think a lot of times when I'm working with folks, they'll say, yeah, I know everybody gets, the range is 87 to 92. That's great. It's good to have that range, but what do you need? Remember the questions about what do you need to survive, right? You've got to make sure that the take home pay is worthwhile. And then whatever plan you have for your financial planning, it fits in for that. So a budget is important. Please make one for yourself. I will be sharing resources that will actually help you calculate your take home pay for the state you're in. If you put in some information about what your, I forget the term for it, but you know how you can, in your W-2, you can put some things down as to deductions. That's right. You can put deductions in, right, for your taxes. So you can figure out take home pay broadly. Research your value. So your skills and experience for the market you're entering, for the specific company, for the specific job and responsibilities, right? What is typical for that? Learn about the employer. So do they have salary bands that are public? Is there a culture or a typical practice? So everybody knows that this is what happens, right? You got to find that out. And what are industry trends broadly. And then for yourself, identify what's a deal breaker. If this offer does not have this, I'm not considering it. That's it. It's a no-brainer. So if there are international students in the audience, some of you may say, if the offer does not include sponsorship of an H-1B visa and eventually a green card, I'm not sure, because that green card is important. Some of you may say, if it doesn't have the possibility of, an H-1B sponsorship, I'm not looking at it at all. I'm done. Like I need sponsorship, right? These are subjective choices, but knowing what you're going to have to decline for is important because there may be offers you end up declining, right? These are the resources. Don't worry, sending all of these to Rajat if I can't fit them in the chat, but they're all copy pasted, ready to share with you all. All of them provide really specific information. The handbook is an overview of negotiation and networking. Our salary data is me kind of making a pitch that you all choose to share your first destination survey, so first job after your degree with us. We have fantastic data for undergraduates. We have very scant data for graduate students for whatever reason, graduate students don't share their first destination data with us, so we're unable to share it with you all. So I don't know if this is something internal to your department, this particular cohort, right? But if you can, and I'm happy to share the link to that, share it. The NACE salary calculator is one of the most granular pieces of information publicly available for what a specific position in a specific city is getting, right? Paycheck City will help you calculate your take-home pay. Salary.com and Glassdoor will give you salary band information, right? This is the broad ballpark of what you can expect. LinkedIn for networking. The AAUW is the American Association of University Women. They have a fantastic free salary negotiation tutorial. They have the prism of the gender pay gap. So they do approach negotiation from sort of closing the gender pay gap, but the training is open to everybody, and it's a really good training. It's not even very long. I encourage you to set it up for yourselves. You can just set it up for yourself and complete it. There's no fee, and it doesn't have to be like a minimum of 10 people who want to do this, right? You can just do it. And then people will be resources, all contacts and mentors that you may have. So I'm trying to rush through this because I want to have some time for questions, but this is the process I wanted to talk through for negotiation, right? So if you look at this, there is no template for this, right? It's going to depend a lot on the person you're talking to. Have they directly connected you with HR, or is the person who's going to supervise you talking to you, or is the person who's led the search going to talk to you? All of that will affect how the rest of it unfolds, right? Do you want to have it by phone or email? We encourage that negotiation happen over the phone. It's easy to have a conversation as opposed to sort of stilted email communications, harder to, or let's put it this way, it's easier to misread the tone of a typed up email than it is the positive happiness in your voice and the smile in your voice, right? So try and keep it phone, or Teams or WebEx or something, right? Who uses WebEx, Teams or Zoom? Keep it honest and professional, so you can absolutely leverage another job offer if you're negotiating, but only if you have the offer. If there's a promise of an offer, you're going to get one because they sounded like they're going to give you an offer, but they haven't given you an offer, you cannot mention it. You don't have it in hand, right? It would be unethical of you to say, yeah, I'd like you to increase this because I'm expecting a competitive offer from one of your competitors. Nope, it's not an expectation, it's in hand, right? Don't negotiate against yourself though, by saying, I know I asked for two things, but if you wouldn't mind, there's also this third thing I'd like. Nope, just be professional. This is your value. You've researched your value. You know your employer can afford you. Ask for what you deserve, right? And sort of talk about it in terms of, this would benefit me, this would benefit us, right? It's a mutual beneficial conversation. And get the final offer in writing. It's important that that be in writing. Sometimes folks will have conversations over the phone and say, we'll sort of hammer out the details and then you'll get an offer. That's fine, but there should be some sort of email or something saying, we are going to be giving you an offer. Some federal employment does that. They'll give you an offer in forthcoming sort of email, but then they'll talk about the offer before they give you the final contract. But make sure that something is in writing. If you don't get anything in writing, make sure that you are writing up the email and sending it back to the person. The important thing is that you need to know what your needs are, right? Salary, paid time off, other benefits, whatever it is, and then be ready to ask for it, but do it in a way that makes you comfortable, right? So if you want to use the phone, use the phone. If you think email makes you feel better, do that. And the same thing for networking, right? It's important to recognize what kind of professional you are and what you want to communicate with people, but do it in a way that you're comfortable with, that's authentic to you. Because if you fake it and then you show up on the job and you're not the person they saw in the interview, you're unhappy, they're unhappy, right? So just make sure that whoever shows up to negotiate and whoever shows up to network is the person who's going to show up to do the job. Yeah. With that, I'm going to end and I'm going to stop sharing my screen. We have 1 minute according to Rajat's initial request to have questions, but I'm happy to stay for a few more minutes if people have the time. So yeah, any questions? I think Rajat had offered to read them out when people posted them in the chat. So
Yeah,
that's
I
an
don't
option.
see any questions as such, but I have a comment more than a question. You mentioned the elevator pitch, and it's interesting because we at ITE also conduct an elevator pitch event
Okay,
every semester. We're also doing this semester, but ours is more related to research
sure.
rather than introduction. And I see Abdullah asked a question.
Yeah.
That's should we always go for a higher salary than what is first offered?
Yeah. So actually, the word always, I don't know. I don't think you should always go, Abdullah. But here's the thing. It's almost guaranteed that if the employer offered you X amount, they can offer you X plus. They're not going to start with the maximum they can offer you. You may be in a scenario, and I've worked with students who've done that, right? You may be in a scenario where you think, I've got 8% more than I wanted. It's on the higher end of the spectrum for my skill set. They're going to do all of these other things. I don't know how this could be better. Sure, I could get more money, but it's more important that I just say yes and move on. And I've had folks do that. I think the expectation is that you negotiate, right? They're almost expecting you to do it, but it's not required. So if you feel like this is perfect, like I'm happy to start tomorrow, you don't have to negotiate. But keep in mind, if they offered you X, they can give you a little bit more than that. Yeah. The only thing I'd say is, remember, salary is only one item for negotiation. You may say it's a great salary. I don't want to ask for more, but what I might ask for is a different start date, or I might ask for some other perks, right? Or I might ask for a separate special project or something. So it doesn't have to be focused on salary if you don't need it to be focused on salary. Yeah. What are some tricks to go about career fairs and IRs? Ricardo, can you be a little more specific? You mean to attend them or?
Yeah, so to prepare, for example, so some people, they say that you should prepare something before you go, or even contact the people or the employers.
Yeah. I think preparation is key. Like I said, so what I would say is figure out who's coming that you're interested in. If you know the specific people and not just the companies, look them up in advance, right? And then figure out why you want to talk to them. So is it a fair where it's more just meet and greet, or is it a fair where they've told you that this will lead to interviews, right? The preparation may be slightly different. Even if it's a fair where it's just a meet and greet, be ready with your resume or other documents that you may need to share with them. Be ready to show up for an interview, basically. And then the other piece is the follow-up piece. So when you're in that conversation with them, make sure you've got their names right. Tell them, maybe give them a heads up saying, I will be connecting with you on LinkedIn. I look forward to staying in touch, right? So they're looking for you. That also gives you something to put in your 300 character limit in the note box that goes with the LinkedIn connection request. Great speaking with you here. As I said, I'm going to follow up here. It's me following up, sort of that sort of signposting, right? Preparing them to hear from you is helpful. The other strategy is, in COVID times right now, I'm pretty sure that most of the bigger fairs, you all may have one internal to your specialization, but most of the bigger fairs, it's not sort of a walk-in, meet somebody by standing in a queue for half an hour. It's all appointment based. So it sort of modifies what I'm going to say is, but I was going to say that do not have your first interaction be with your best, most favorite company. Give that to the company that's good, but not your number one. So you're sort of getting into the flow of conversation, right? Practicing the pitch, like the ums and ahs, let them happen the first round. You get comfortable with it, and then you can go for the big companies. So those would be some quick tips that I would share for career fairs. If you know which platform they're going to be using, a virtual platform, make sure you're familiar with it as much as you can. So yeah, technology should be your friend as much as possible. Any other questions?
All right. Seems like we're exactly on time. And yeah, it was a great presentation. certainly very intriguing. And thank you once again, Amruta.
Yeah.
We welcome, we hope we have more CCO presentations in the future.
Where I know I speak for my office, we're happy to come and offer presentations and workshops like this. And also work with you all one-on-one. So feel free to reach out. We're happy to do that. Can I just make a quick, can I just say another thing, Rajat, if you wouldn't mind? I do want to say that if you're a PhD student, there is an appointment topic called PhD Student Career Planning. That's the one we encourage you all to make. You can use it for document reviews for a tenure track application. You can use it for a conversation about, I don't know what I want to do. I like these two options. Help me figure out what my options are, right? So it can be a conversation. It can be a document review. I don't know if there are any master's students, if you wanted to, you could use the PhD student option. We're not going to refuse to work with you because you chose the wrong topic. But we have job search strategies appointments that are 30 minutes that may be more effective for either one, like master's, PhD, whichever. So choose the ones that work for you. And then the other thing about the appointments is that they're completely confidential. So none of us, whether you make it with me or anybody else in my office, we will not be disclosing to anybody else what you choose to share with us. It's your information, so you can share what you want to. But it's not like, we'd be like, oh yeah, Rajat has made 4 appointments with me. No, that's not. He hasn't. But even if he had, I would not be disclosing that, right? So it's completely confidential. One of the reasons is sometimes students want to work with us without their faculty advisors necessarily knowing. I'm not saying that anybody in this audience is in that situation, but our responsibility is to support your career goals. What your parents and faculty and significant others want from you is not what we're here to support. We're here to support what you want, right? So yeah, if you all need any sort of career development assistance or want to talk through anything, stop by our office. Metaphorically speaking, it's all virtual, and we'd be happy to work with you. So thank you for giving me 2 minutes for pitching my office. And it was nice to see all of you. Thank you to those of you who switched on your cameras, and nice to see all of the others stay through all the way. Thank you. Yeah, bye.
All right. See you all next week then. Thanks, Amruta.
You're welcome.
Goodbye.
Bye.